Joining us today is Joy Jarrett, the Chief Marketing Officer of Guidehouse, a leading global provider of consulting services for the public sector and commercial markets. With their vast expertise in management, technology, and risk consulting, as of today, Guidehouse boasts a team of over 16,000 plus professionals across 55 plus locations worldwide. With more than 20 years experience launching and building well-known, respected, and trusted global brands, Joy focuses on building and accelerating the company's brand recognition and growth priorities in partnership with the executive team and sales organization. She oversees all corporate communications, branding, marketing campaigns, media and digital platforms to deliver strategies for brand distinction, differentiation, and market impact. Before joining Guidehouse, Joy played an instrumental role in the launch, pre- and post-IPO of WebMD, led global digital marketing programs at IBM, supported sponsored programming with the Atlanta Committee for the Olympic Games. That sounds really cool. And led the corporate rebranding, enterprise communications, media execution, and marketing for a large global public sector defense consulting firm. Joy, welcome to our community, to our little show here.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting to be with you and all your listeners today.
Thank you. We're excited to have you. Let's start this off with, for those who've never heard of Guidehouse, who are its customers and what problem or problems are you helping them solve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Guidehouse was formed about 5.5 years ago. It is originated from the public sector of PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, who decided to get out of public consulting, and they sold that portion of the business to a private equity company called Veritas Capital at the time. Part of the strategy with the new firm was to create a different model of consulting than what was currently in the market. It wasn't, let's just be another version of Deloitte or E&Y or Accenture. And those models, you have a siloed organization where your public sector advisory team sits very separate from your commercial market advisory team. And what we were seeing is that to solve these really complex issues where you've got the regulated and the regulator having to work together, and sometimes doing that effectively and sometimes not, that the way to really change the course of how healthcare could be delivered or how geopolitical risk could be mitigated and managed at a street level, you needed to understand the interrelatedness between public and private and be able to convey that to both sides of the market effectively. So we created a very different platform model, starting out truly as public sector. And then we acquired about a year later a large commercial practice out of Chicago called Navigant, that brought complementary segment expertise in the commercial markets where we had public sector expertise. So where we had healthcare, public health, where we did work for the VA, the CDC, NIH, they had deep payer provider expertise, life sciences expertise. So it was a beautiful marriage. And so within the segments that we support, it is an integrated P&L, integrated model. What that means for the client is you get a much broader kind of 360-degree view of the market that you have to work within, whether you're sitting on the regulated or regulator side. And it also means that as an employee, you get the benefit of kind of migrating between the two and having a broader perspective on how the recommendations that you're trying to bring to a client on one half could be supported, or the risk that you would need to navigate through and executing that.
And from the examples you shared, I heard a couple that were within the healthcare space. The health space. Is that has there been a particular sector where you focus and zoned in on, or or from the get-go, it was still continuing, I guess, across a span of industries?
Well, there are certain industries that we know we don't play in, like we don't do supply chain, we don't do retail, really. The markets that we play in are health, because there's a regulated and a non-regulated component of it. Health, we do financial services work. So we work with the Department of HUD, of housing, or the Department of Treasury. We handled a lot of the COVID funding that was going out into the market. We set up the TARP program many, many years ago. So the expertise in how to work with the Department of Treasury and all of those other sub-agencies that work to absorb that money to then perform the contracting work that they need to deliver to the market. We help within a lot of that kind of financial management.
Does that come, is it in terms of who hires you first, right? Because it's this bridge, but is it the enterprise, the private side that says, hey, we're about to be working on this particular massive, contract with the government and we need your services? Or is it the government, or is vice versa? It happens.
Well, it's both actually in certain cases. So let's take COVID. That's a great example where the government, for the first time ever, was dispersing massive amounts of funding to relieve, both what was happening in the commercial markets, but what was happening personally. And by that, I mean like the rental relief program. So we helped states set up their management system, everything from your application process, the review of those applications, the verification that the applications were valid, that they weren't, someone trying to
rig the system,
falsify, and break the system. And then we would manage the disbursement of the funds for the state.
Wow. That's massive.
It was like setting up and we did that in certain cases where we were working with states that had brought on one particular provider and that provider was failing to meet their timeline. We had to turn projects around in 30 days where you're hiring 1,200, 1,500 people, you're equipping them with laptops, you're training them on what the program.
Was this a particular state, or these were a number of states?
This was a particular state.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm like, this is like the scale of this is crazy.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. These are highly complex issues that are interrelated across multiple functional entities within an organization, where an organization has to work with a public sector arm to execute a particular program that they're looking to. And so I'll take it all the way to the commercial market. It's all also like the banks that were receiving these new loan applications. How do they process them in a way so that they can take the funding and to then give rental relief funding to those corporations? So it's not just a homeowner exercise, it's all of the other corporate work that goes behind that, and sort of management of financial flow of funds, risk mitigation, cybercrime activity, investigating that on the back end.
When you joined Guidehouse, how did you figure out what your priorities would be? Are there certain questions that you ask yourself? Is there a certain type of process that through your years of through your journey of leading marketing in a number of different types of institutions, are there things that you kind of have in your back pocket every time you joining a new institution and you ask yourself?
Well, so I'm informed by the corporate strat plan process, as I was at IBM or WebMD, and I'm thankful to say that we run an annual strat planning process just like most corporations do. we work with across all the segments that we go to market, and plus all the verticals that would support kind of delivery of different types of services. And by that, I mean, we have a technology vertical, because technology is not really agnostic to any particular, and it is agnostic to any particular industry. We have a sustainability practice where, because again, that's something that is agnostic to any industry. So I work with those teams to understand what their strategy is, both at the account level and at the pursuit. So the pursuit areas are those must-win deals that may be new markets within the area of healthcare that we want to, that we know that we have deep expertise in supporting solving a particular business problem to move forward at the care delivery of health within a particular area.
Joy, how do you in these, and when you said I couldn't hear well, was it like strategy sessions? Is that
Yeah, so we have a period of about 3 to 4 months. We're just about to initiate our strat planning process at the segments and the verticals, and then that rolls up to an executive review board. We meet, we look at both those business pains and the services that are specific to an industry or a submarket. We also look at those that are common across multiple industries that we would want to elevate in a way that we call mega trends. So a big mega trend that and there are 5 that we've identified, is the influx of cash into the market supporting the infrastructure bill, the IRA bill, right? So for the first time ever, states are receiving all this money to upgrade their infrastructure. They don't have a system. Often it involves upgrading your technology system. Often it involves looking at data about how your community infrastructure is responding to everything from, fire and flood, disaster recovery, resiliency, all the way to just age and infrastructure that needs to be rehabilitated. It's everything from your threats of cyber against those particular infrastructure areas. You've probably seen where ambulances were redirected because of a cyber attack within a particular area of the market. It also involves looking at power distribution, like we saw disrupted by the war in Ukraine. So we look at these issues globally, holistically, and we've got enterprise megatrends that we provide service against. And then we have very vertically focused services that align to the markets we support.
How long has Guidehouse been around? And I know that it broke off from PwC, but like as a standalone Guidehouse, its own brand. How long has that been around?
About 5.5 years.
5.5 years.
So we have we started out about 1,300 people, just over 600 million in revenues. We did the acquisition of Navigant, which brought commercial expertise in. We did our second acquisition, which was Dovell Technologies, to add a technology expertise in areas where we wanted to grow based on our client needs.
Yep.
And more recently, in October of last year, we acquired the public sector of Grant Thornton to both add headcount in various segment areas where we had client growth and expertise and skill set to the firm. So in about 5.5 years, we've grown from the 1,300 to over close to 17,000 global employees in over 55 locations. Our revenues now are from that 600 million price point to over, well, we just, did a big announcement on Monday. We're a part of the Bain Capital private equity team, I would say, our portfolio now, and at a valuation of 5.2 billion. So the growth has been meteoric.
Incredible.
It's just been incredible, you
And
know.
how
And
do you, so, all right, so this is, I love when, in your case, especially, and you're about to complete 5 years too, I believe, more or less
yes,
with the, so,
with the firm,
yeah,
yes,
with the firm. So you came in, you know, doubled it, had to continue with what this new brand is about, what this niche is about, you know, how you are perceived by your customers. And how do you go about taking from what you said 5 years ago where you were to now? What are some, how do you go about maintaining that new brand that you're spreading out there, that message of what your brand is? How do you keep that brand consistency while growing and driving growth? Because uh
yeah.
there's so many moving pieces to this. You know, how does everyone stay with understand what the brand is about, and how do you go about doing that?
Well, that's such a great question, because when you think about it, 5 years ago, there was no COVID, right? Like, and then shortly after, I think 2 months, 2 or 3 months after we did the acquisition of Navigant, where we were bringing our true vision of this integrated commercial public sector platform to life. Like, that was always a part of the original vision. And we hunkered down the first few years and just focused on client retention and
Mhm.
growing the base, right? Then we acquired to validate the vision that we had. Then you hit COVID. So all the opportunities to launch the platform stopped because no one was investing in marketing spend. We were all trying to figure out if we had a business model. Every competitor was, right?
Right.
And so we really focused on our people and doing the work that our clients needed us to do so they could stay whole, because they had workforces that had never been enabled to work remotely. So we would come in and help them transform their business model so that they could stay whole. And in that, we learned how to work together as a commercial, public, united organization. So it was the timing almost worked in our favor. When we were coming out of COVID and everyone was like, okay, now we need to launch the brand, about 3.5 years ago, we said, to launch a brand, we can't just be another Me Too in the sea of sameness that we're being associated with, because we know that our platform is different and we know how we do our work is different. So we spent time really defining what I would say, our tagline and our positioning needed to be in the market, which is where we came up with the Outwit Complexity, which really has been a rallying cry for all of our people. They know that they do these very complex engagements with clients that don't know how to get out of the situation that they're in many cases. And that was the first thing that they could kind of self-identify with in a very positive way. And as a result, we spent time, or it enabled us to kind of separate ourselves from the sea of sameness, where everyone else was kind of collecting themselves around the intellectual capital that they could bring to a particular market, versus how we approached these very complex issues.
How long do you think it took for it to actually gel together, from understanding what that message would be of what the brand
Yeah.
is to having everyone all on board and pushing it forward?
So we launched the Outwit Complexity in October 2021. We spent all of 2022 redesigning our website, because remember, we had done all these inorganic growth opportunities through acquisitions, and at the same time we were having, double digit, unlike where our competitors were single digit, we were having double digit client growth organically, just so we were fueling growth from both directions, I would say. But what we didn't have is that integrated story to the market, because we had cobbled together a bunch of different
Right. I mean,
websites
you're
to make
adding
that
all these
happen.
acquisitions and new
Yeah.
cultures and teams to the
Oh yeah.
mix.
Oh yeah. And we're figuring out, like, every day, every year, we're restructuring, because we're realizing that state and local, because of the influx of the IRA funding, really should be highly tied to the infrastructure team, the environmental team that we have, the sustainability team, because that's a priority within that particular client set, a public sector or federal market. And so we used this past year to really understand what an integrated journey would be in understanding our platform. And we created a new website. It launched in February to nurture and guide the market through why you would want to know a commercial public sector story when you, sitting on one half, are trying to deal with some common business, issues. And I'm happy to say that the website, we launched at the end of February. For the first half of the year, we generated over $14 million of net new revenue into the business. Clients that had never worked with our firm before, coming in, understanding the business model, working through the RFP process, and we won new work, which is pretty exciting.
What channels, and again, when it's integrated, you have this message carried across all these different channels. Which ones for this new business that was brought in, which ones were the most efficient, effective? Were there things that within your campaigns that you said, wow, like, so that new website, super valuable, right? To have that information. But how did you go about attracting or getting people to the inflow, right?
Yeah. Originally, most of our media spend was handled at the segment level, where it was very targeted and surgically executed against where our public sector decision makers were in the various geographies that they resided. And then we did more membership and targeted commercial advertising. Once we had outwit complexity, we decided to add top tier media. So we advertise and partner with Wall Street Journal and do custom content, Bloomberg, Financial Times, Washington Post, a lot of the business journals around the country where we also have offices or a concentration of clients. Once we expanded, and launched the new website to really demonstrate and explain to the market. And honestly, it explained to our people the interrelatedness of commercial and public, which was really interesting to watch internally. We expanded where we were getting good traction with the brand recognition and some opportunities to really own like custom areas of content within our top tier media that we're performing. Plus, we add in some surgical things that we do in Apple News, following people, not in a spooky, creepy way, but in a way where they've opted in and we're able to continue to deliver content to them. We're still in that discovery phase, I would say. It's not like we've got years and years. We've got, the launch year of 2021 or 2022. We've got this year looking at our second year really in market with top tier media. We're trying new things. We're learning what's working and what's not.
What was that content that you said that there's certain content that you wanted to go, like, that you own or you wanted to go deeper on? You mentioned something related.
So we have vertical specific partners. So like defense news for our defense and national security agency clients that we work with. We work with those vertical specific media companies to help us own different areas of that particular decision-making discovery process. It could be everything from tech modernization in defense news, because we know that our defense contractor audience is really dealing with tech mod, with all the influx of having to convert their fleets. And then how are they going to secure the fleet, power delivery? And that all requires a completely different technical infrastructure than what they currently work within.
Throughout your journey, you've been involved in marketing from small, mid-size to enterprise level
Yeah.
companies. What are some key differences that marketers, founders should keep in mind whenever they're marketing to a small mid-size versus to an enterprise? And I might even add to that versus to like a public, to a public institution.
So I think maybe one of the things I learned when I was at IBM for about 10 years is that marketing is only relevant to the C-suite, to my CEO, when I'm making an impact, right? So I'm always around what impact do I have to drive and where do I have to drive it? And then how am I going to distinguish myself, my message from the clutter that is out there so that I can stand out? And I like to really look at the data, sit in all the decision maker chairs so I understand how a CIO is going to process my information versus a CEO versus a procurement lead. They all have different motivations for why they would want to engage with you. And if you can make it as relevant and targeted to the audience as possible, independent of the size of your organization, the more effective you're going to be. I don't believe in spraying and praying and hoping things are going to happen just because you executed a lot of tactics that weren't really tied to the strategy and the vision that your leadership has for where you need to take that organization. You have to be tied together with where the C-suite wants to take and sees the opportunity for growth.
I love that. Personalized, understanding exactly what it is that your audience needs, your prospective customers looking for. Having said that, let's say in a public institution or an enterprise, are there things that they're more incentivized to do? So like enterprises, they have, for the most part, it's money is important, of course, like pricing of a product is relevant and it's important, but are there things that you got to keep in mind, like longer sales cycles or for when you're dealing with an enterprise team and security and privacy, like are there certain things that are always you can count on those versus other types of smaller size teams?
So when you have an integrated model as like ours, where the commercial turn rate on a deal is radically different than a public sector RFP process, and the deal sizes are very different. You may come in and do a consulting engagement because you got to remember, we're in the people business, right? We sell advisory skills, we sell technology deployment, integration, expertise, and management of that. And we sell on the back end managed services, everything from doing all your bill processing for hospitals to manage IT infrastructure on a long-term basis. So when you're in the people business, it's not like you're selling a product like a widget, and it's not like you're trying to drive widget sales up. But that said, commercial markets are a lot of little deals. Every once in a while, you'll get a bluebird. Well, you'll be able to provide rev cycle management support, which is all the billing management support for a large hospital system at a higher efficiency rate and lower cost for them. Those deals, because they're so integrated into the operations of the company, those are much longer deals and a much higher price point, right? On the public sector side, the way that the government interacts with consultancies and others that would want to sell into the private or the public sector is through RFPs. So you are either a prime, meaning you hold the contract and you may be the only person on the contract, or you may be a sub and under the prime, or you could be the prime with multiple subs, right? So there's different relationships that you can hold within these large government contracting deals where they will say, we have $100 million that we're going to apply to overhaul our technology system for how we manage clinical trial work in the CDC. That's just an example.
Got it.
Yeah. And so the deals are different. The close rates are very different. Some things close quickly in public sector. Some things they may spend a year doing just kind of evaluating the market and who's out there. 6 months to develop the RFP, 6 months to evaluate the RFP responses, shortlist, orals, make their decision. But then you've got a 5-year deal, 10-year deal where you've got guaranteed revenue during that period.
Yep.
So what's nice about our financial model is that you have the stability in a way of these public sector deals that we either have that have a longer shelf life or in the pipeline for a longer shelf life. And then it's supplemented, and it's an interesting split. We're about 50-50 equal in our commercial revenue and our public sector revenue, which makes it really attractive.
I want to jump a little bit into partnerships and channel marketing, and whether it was your time at MedHost or the Community Health Systems or IQ Interactive, finding the right partners or ecosystems to market one's product is key. How do you approach channel marketing? Again, it doesn't have to be specifically with what it could be based on what you did at Guidehouse or any of the previous companies. Are there particular questions that you ask yourself? Any particular pitfalls others should think about and avoid when they think about partners and in their channel marketing strategy?
That's a good. So, how would you define in our word? In my world, I kind of define channel like the website's a channel for me. My
It
media
could be
partners.
it's like third parties that have their own communities and sell your product through them. So it could be an ecosystem already of a certain community, or it could be a private company that services the same type of demographic that you are, but for something completely different.
So we have a few teaming partners and alliances, AWS, Workday, SailPoint. Those are all teaming partners where we will team up on large government contract work to share in the deployment and execution of a large project for the government. On the commercial side, we have some, SBA partnerships, those small businesses in those local markets. We have partnerships with a lot of membership organizations that are very vertically focused to allow us from a content strategy and thought leadership perspective to engage with that decision-making audience at a level of credibility that then we can pull into our marketing activity with very custom proprietary event activities and or create custom content together, various survey reports that we may do with healthcare organizations, risk and compliance organizations. Law firms, ironically, are a channel into where they may be working where a company has had a breach, a cyber breach, and we would come in to help and provide a different level of investigation, technical investigation, and kind of fraud and financial crime investigation. And then we would manage that ongoingly for a crypto firm or a large financial institution going forward.
That's pretty cool. That's a cool perspective of having a certain type of deal flow coming from that side, from law firms. Everyone is restricted always with whether you have a big budget to work with or a small budget to work with when it comes to marketing. At the end of the day, it's not unlimited. So what I always love trying to figure out is, how do you go about figuring out how to allocate the budget for certain campaigns? How do you keep track of what that ROI is and how that budget should be allocated?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're an infant brand. I mean, when you look at it, we've only really been in the market maybe 3 years since we launched Outwit Complexity. Although we've got the tenure and I would say the halo of coming from these different acquisitions and the foundation of PwC's brand. So in the beginning, the marketing budget allocation was very focused around what we call, and kind of laugh at, like food, water, shelter. I got to get content. I got to get a web page.
The basics, the foundations.
Just the basic foundational elements. And then once we added in the Outwit Complexity, which is much more high level, right? Like the enterprise stepped in and said, okay, we're going to fund a campaign that is top tier media, where I had very flat budgets in my segments. I supplemented that. So you keep doing all your bottom up work in the segment space, those audience focused campaigns, market focused campaigns, driven by the business problems that those markets are facing. I'm going to do highbrow. We're going to start establishing the credibility of the platform, how we're different, how what we do provides different value and insight for you as a business leader, to give that distinction and differentiation that we want from all the other consultancies that we have to fight against, so that we can not be the me too, but continue to distinguish ourselves. So we're very surgical in kind of how we make those decisions, and it's really driven by impact. And if we're not getting impact with a blank media partner, I pull it, and I'm not going to keep investing in them the next quarter, and we'll move to where we are seeing the performance at the metrics that we want.
I was going to say, are there certain avenues where you're providing those partners not just a quarter, but a little bit more time to be able to see results? Like, where's the lever that you have based on certain channels or avenues?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we're 2 years in market for top tier media. And every year, my marketing directors sit and look at their budget. They sit with their segment executive on their priorities. They either increase investment in areas where we both agree we should, or we decrease and start eliminating areas of the budget where we may be at a maturity state to leave behind some of the small things that we did, which were maybe a personal pet project of a particular person, that at this point we're a much bigger brand. We don't have to do those small things because we're still going to get that awareness as a large top tier brand. And so it's those kind of trade-offs that we're making all the time, bottom up. And then I'm looking top down annually at what our media performance plan ran for me for the year. Because I have 2 years now. Like,
Right,
I will
right.
at the end of this year have my second year to look back.
Have events been a big? Oh, really?
Big.
That takes up a lot of the resources for you?
Yes. And I would say, like coming out of COVID, there was so much pent up, I just got to get back into humanity desire on both public and commercial.
Yeah.
That we were shocked to see how many people were, they would do these hybrid events, but there were a lot more people showing up because they just wanted to get out and get back into what was the old way of doing work, right?
Right.
In the public sector in particularly, we don't have access to the public sector buyer as easily as you do in commercial areas. And so events are really important. And what we've done is not just come in, because we have a very small budget when you look at our the size of our company compared to what we spend for marketing. We've stayed pretty flat year over year as far as our marketing spend goes. And what we do is we say, okay, we're going to go to this conference. We're going to have a small booth, but we're going to have a private room, and we're going to schedule with our clients going private meetings. And then we have our one-on-one time in a captured environment where they feel comfortable to take their coat off and start sharing, what's really going on and why this is such an important project for them. And so that's been incredibly successful. We've restructured our booth space. In many areas, we're moving from that small footprint to a much larger player because our brand demands it. Basically, we've got, the credibility in the marketplace. We really need to show up at a certain space visible level, because that also plays into, well, are these small fish players or are they big guys, So our event strategy is critically important to both our public and commercial market successes.
Would you, and I don't know if you're already doing it, but do you host your own event as well or no?
We certain acquisitions used to do those proprietary events. And I think we're at the maturity state where we're going to look at doing those going forward. We've tested a couple just recently with membership organizations predominantly, and we're looking to do more of that in our strategy for 2024. And we're also looking to team with a couple of media partners where we've had some really great performance in creating some exclusive networks where we have a shared value against a shared audience, and it fit with some content gaps that they don't have in market that we can bring expertise and advisory, thought leadership into that space. So it becomes a win-win for everyone.
When you mentioned thought leadership, aside from events, are there other ways in which you have been investing a ton on thought leadership? I know when we talk about content, right, and going down all the verticals and making sure you're covering things that your customers actually need to hear, need to learn. But are there certain things that whether it's something fairly new that you just launched that has been working fairly well when it comes to thought leadership?
Our thought leadership has been dispersed. So we work with our subject matter experts in the line. They identify content opportunities based on the strategic priorities of their either account or their segment. And then we collaborate on the creation of that content. And then we'll sometimes animate it. We'll sometimes do videos on it. We'll sometimes, look at how we can diversify the data points in that content. Given that we've had this kind of bottom-up approach to thought leadership, we introduced some highbrow concepts in the megatrends just recently. I mean, it really just hit the website in the end of September. Going forward, we're creating an enterprise editorial and content board, and they will inform. They're going to take those big enterprise agenda setting issues that we want to be known for in the market. We'll put a content strategy against that, and then we'll start testing how that can elevate the brand and further distinguish us in the market, and what we could create custom to support those audiences where we feel like we could lean in a little bit more with the C-suite, if that makes sense.
Yep, completely makes sense. This is my final question here. It's lessons learned. What are there any for marketers out there, heads of marketing, founders that are growing their companies? Any advice, any particular pitfalls that you say, make sure whenever you're thinking about marketing, try to avoid these, or, try and do this? Anything that comes to mind that you'd like to share?
I'm sorry about that.
No.
Dogs. It's interesting. In an emerging brand, we're trying and failing in a lot of these areas. And I think I always go back to, I have to earn a seat at the table with my executive team every day. So I have to start, like, what's my impact? What am I driving today? How can I make a difference in supporting and making the sales process easier? so that I can engage and have a higher relationship opportunity and engagement value with that end stakeholder who's making the decision. I think a lot of times people run after let's do an Instagram video, or they use things that are in the common space from a social perspective, and they forget that they're talking to a B2B decision maker who isn't really in that channel and not really using that channel to drive credibility around your brand, right? Use it all day long for employee engagement or for recruiting opportunities, but don't go post your thought leadership there, right? So I just think that maybe the opportunity is to be surgical, and maybe sometimes less is more, and to build that credibility bottom up instead of feeling like you have to, compete at a high level where it's high expenditure, really difficult to track, really difficult to convert.
I love that. Joy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you.